Hello everyone and welcome. Welcome to this Gateway Women Masterclass webinar, and it's a very special edition today because this is actually a Q&A with documentary radio and filmmaker Hilary Fennell, who is the director, producer and writer of the amazing Childless documentary, which has just come out in Ireland. It's on Newstalk a week ago and it's going to be on Newstalk again, and you can download it as a podcast and listen to it anywhere in the world. Just go to documentary on I've lost my Newstalk, documentary on Newstalk, which is on Apple or Spotify, and then look for the episode called Childless and you can listen to it. So my name's Jody Day. I'm the founder of Gateway Women. I'm incredibly proud to have been behind the scenes with this documentary, to be featured in it, to have assisted Hilary in a small way in finding some of her participants. And it's just, we were on breakfast television together last week in Ireland. Hilary's been absolutely storming the airwaves. And there's another big article coming out in the Irish Examiner this coming Saturday. Ireland and the world are really taking notice of this documentary. So first of all, Hilary, I would like to say from all of us, thank you. Thank you so much.
Lovely.
And yeah, so I would really love, you to maybe tell the audience a little bit about you and your work, and then we'll dive into talking about the documentary.
Sure. Well, predominantly, I usually work in television and film. I also work in radio, but mainly in TV, making documentaries, making programs. I'm also a journalist and I write fiction, and I also lecture. I teach about how to make programs, how to make documentaries. And I also just qualified as a yoga teacher. But my main interest, I suppose, when I come up with the idea, sometimes I work on other people's programs over the years, not always my own ideas, because it's very hard to find funding, obviously. But when I do, what I really am interested in is social issues and issues that will really make an impact in the world in some way. And over the years, I've made a lot of those programs about other people, about other minorities, other groups of people, other groups of disenfranchised groups, shall we say. And I've always felt that was kind of without being hippyish, about like my calling was to do that type of work. And I suppose my superpower is interviewing people and getting them to tell their truth, and really digging down into people's innermost, very personal lives. And then I thought of this subject and I was like, is this even a thing, or is it just in my head? Because I have children and I would have loved to have children. And then when I started researching it, I really didn't think it was a thing. Do you know what I mean? I thought it's just me, like it's interesting, but it's not really a thing that you could make a documentary about. And when I began to research it, I honestly couldn't believe it. When I saw that statistic, 1 in 5, 20% of women over 45. I thought I'd misread it, or it was, the way sometimes statistics are made headlines of. So that's really how I got the idea.
Yeah, I had the same thing when I first came across that number. And for you and I, born in the 60s, it's actually 1 in 4.
Wow.
The average is 1 in 5, but for our cohort, the 1960s, it's 1 in 4. And there are significant early indicators that all developed countries will be moving towards the 1 in 3 seen in Germany and Japan, and actually that Japan may go up to 1 in 2. Because once you have more and more childless people without children in the population, then there's less people to have children, and then less people to have the next. So actually, you do get quite significant sort of population decline. So it is something that is going to become much more visible in our societies. And it's so interesting the way I've been talking about this for years, other people have been talking about this for years, and yet no one wants to talk about it.
No, and I mean the way I felt, like I would have personally been something I wanted to do for, wanted to have a child. So, but I thought it was just in my head, because whenever I tried to talk to about people, they were trying to be nice, but I almost felt they were kind of contradicting me and saying, well, no, you didn't really want to have kids, because if you did, you would have them in your 20s, or look at, aren't you very choosy about the men you pick? You know, what, like, as if I just wanted to have, I know, but it's like I wanted to have a relationship with the person who wanted a child, and a child. I don't think that's too much to ask.
It
But
isn't.
because I probably had left it until, you know, because of my career and going to get all the degrees and all the things that we were told we were meant to do, it was in my mid 30s, and my relationship that I've been in for a long time just split up at that time. So, you know, it's the usual story. You've got to find somebody else, have a baby, do all these things in like a year or 2 years. So, and when I started, now that's just my story, but when I started researching it, and I couldn't believe that I was seeing woman, this woman, this woman, this woman, this person, all these people with the same story. And that's when, I mean, it's not, you know, it's a while. I got in touch with you probably over a year ago, but it was even a while before that I was conscious of this. But I still, because it's so hidden and so not discussed, with my friends, because a lot of them have children, and I'm delighted for them, but I always felt I was just annoying them. You know, kind of being a bit annoying, saying, I wish I had kids, and it's like you're moaning. Like, so it was very hard. And then I would always tend to laugh things off, and I was grand. So I started to think it really is just me. Like, I'm just a bit, I'm lingering about this, or I'm making this a mountain out of a molehill. Like, I'm so lucky with all the things I have. So it was really interesting for me when I discovered, and it also made me feel quite angry when I discovered there's layers and layers and layers to this. So one of the biggest challenges I had was trying to make a 46-minute program about this topic, because, like, I do want to make a TV series, a whole series, but in 46 minutes, you can really only touch on things. And also I had to decide, well, who will I interview? Will it just be women? Will it also be men? Will it be, you know, LGBTQ community? It's so big. And I just decided, no, for this one, I just said, unashamedly, I'm going to pick some women, and you can really only have a maximum of 6 voices in a 1-hour doc. So I was just amazed, though, that I interviewed a huge amount of people to get those 6 people, and that the similarity of the stories, and the fact that the layer upon layer upon layer of thing, that it's societal, that the whole, it's not in my head, I wasn't making it up, that pronatal thing. Like, in my mum's generation, you know, she loved her kids and everything, but we weren't, it was, I don't remember marketing being bombarding all the representations of motherhood, and, you know, all the positive things about motherhood, and so little positive about women who don't have children. And when I started to dig it down into that, I just thought, this is massive.
It is massive.
Isn't it? I mean, I know you've been working on it for years, and you've been a fantastic resource for me, but you know, that phrase, you can't unknow what you know, is that it? You can't. So I'm trying to remember what it was like before I knew this stuff, because I'm talking to people now and they're literally looking at me going, I don't know what she's on about. Then I say, well, listen to the documentary. And I've had so many people who know me say on social media, whatever, just saying, God, I'd no idea. And I'm going, but like, so they just presumed I didn't want to have children, which is fair enough, because I never discussed it really. But it's that if I'm just one person, there's so many people I know with a similar story. So I think it's one of those documentaries that will hopefully unleash, allow people, give people permission to speak about this.
And I guess something I'm interested in is, what was it like for you to make that transition from it being a personal issue to something that you felt able to go public about? Because I know that childlessness is a very, very private subject, and it's one which is, for many of us, policed by shame, by social shame, which keeps us silent, because there's this idea there's something kind of wrong with us for being childless. And something you mentioned, and a lot of people have commented on it, you know, to me, talking to me about the documentaries, is when, you know, talk about how hard it was to find people who were willing, that you had more no's for this documentary than you've ever had before. And you've made some documentaries about some extremely sensitive and private stuff. And I wondered if you could talk maybe about what it was like for you to kind of come out as childless in such a public way, and also talking to those participants who were saying no. What do you think is going on there?
Well, I'll answer the second part first. So I think what was going on with the people who said no is that they were really delighted to help me with my research. But they would not go on the record and be interviewed, or otherwise they were saying, could they be interviewed and not put their name to it? I'm going, well, that's crazy. Your voice will be heard. And once you've a contract as a program maker as well, I don't mean a legal contract, I mean a moral contract. You just don't, well, I just wouldn't go there with somebody. You're either comfortable to speak or you're not. So I really had to find people who are comfortable to have their full name said. That was very important to me, because I didn't want people who felt ashamed about this, because that's it's kind of the whole point, is to reconfigure that, to reframe that. So the thing that stands out in my head most, and it was just a comment that somebody said, is she didn't want to be seen with the losers. Like, the first time on Irish radio, I don't want my people looking at me, oh, there's your one, like she's a loser. That's a real Irish phrase, loser. It means kind of, you know what a loser is. So, and I was like, wow, like this is a very sophisticated person, immensely successful in what they do, like fabulous woman. And this is the response. And also I got some quite tetchy no's from, initially I thought I'd go with famous people, high profile people. And they were like, how dare you ask me this? And I was like, I just wondered, might you? And some of them have spoken out about it before. But look, that's par for the course with documentary making and program making. You always get lots of no's. But it was the style of the no. It was almost like, I'm really sorry, I'd love to help you, but I can't. And years ago,
not I won't, I can't.
No, I can't.
Yeah, how
I
interesting.
literally can't. So the irony of it is, like a good few years ago, I made another really great radio documentary. It's called Cherish All the Children, and it's on my website. And it's about the first single mothers in Ireland. So it was about, it was completely taboo here to have a baby out of wedlock. But what happened was, these women, they were the first ones. They set up a society. They got the whole law changed. But they told me the only reason they did it was because they weren't ashamed, because the main woman, her parents had died when she started going on television. This is 40 years ago. So I can see the parallels, you know what I mean? That so then she didn't mind going on telly and saying, yeah, I have a baby and I'm not married. She was fine doing that. And more
It's a bit like the advice you give to writers, write as if your parents were dead.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we're both, so you have to try and do that. But again, so I was really surprised. I was surprised. I knew there'd be some no's, but I didn't know it would be so kind of embarrassed no's, like as in, and I was going, but you're not a criminal, like you've done nothing wrong.
That's the thing. You've done nothing wrong.
Well, you see, the thing is that people don't like, and I am still not comfortable talking about this, because it's my professional life. So, I mean, I have to be really careful. I don't want to be identified with this. I'm going to make tons of documentaries about other things as well. But I just thought it was important to kind of explore it and to really, I suppose I'm probably the best person to make this documentary. So, there's a whole style of documentary making now, is why like in the past, like a white male, blah, blah, has gone and filmed a tribe or whatever. Like, why not give the tribe a camera and get them to film their own thing? And so I'm the perfect person to make this, because I totally understand it.
You're part of the tribe.
But I'm an expert in it. I mean, I am the best person to make this. So I suppose I would have been annoyed if somebody who didn't get it made it.
I would have been very annoyed.
So as well, there comes a time where you go, like, what's the worst that can happen? Like by saying this, I mean, why are we all so, like, this is actually happening and it's affecting society, and it's not like, from an altruistic sense, I mean, we do need to look at this because of where it's going. Like, we're just putting our heads in the sand, I feel, is that nobody's really, it's like, oh, Hilary wanted to have children. Like, this isn't a personal thing. This is about me altruistically saying to the world, if we don't do something about this policy wise, tell the younger women, like, IVF doesn't always work, all of that, maybe have your babies younger. This might be politically incorrect, but it's the truth. Like, look at that, also policy wise. And I'm not just talking about government. I mean, socially, what kind of society do we want to live in? I mean, there's going to be tons of people who are going to be getting older who don't have children. to keep them company, even if they're not sick, to mind them, whatever. And I just feel really strongly that it's something that it seems to me almost unbelievable that people don't know about this cohort. I just don't understand why. I know.
I mean, I could make a whole documentary explaining what is happening unconsciously about why we're not engaging with it, but I'm not going to go into that. I will save that because I have a couple of questions here, and I won't say the name of the person to keep it anonymous. But she's asked, the documentary is just brilliant. What hurdles did you have to go through building a business case, presentation to get funding? What information did you present to get someone to open their wallet? And she has a follow-up question. And how did you feel when it was first aired?
So it is funded. I live in Ireland, and here we have public service broadcasting. So everybody in Ireland who watches television is meant to pay a license fee. And 7% of that license fee is put into a pot. And every year, program makers can apply for some of that money with programs that have some kind of historical merit or societal merit, or they have to have some. They can't just be entertainment shows.
Right.
So and that's called the Sound and Vision Fund. So I applied to that fund. So it's public money. But in order to get that money, which is tiny, by the way, for radio documentary, I mean, it's laughable. But in order to get that money, I first had to get a broadcaster who is willing to broadcast it. So there's a few in Ireland, a few radio stations. So Newstalk said they would broadcast it. So I get that tick. Then I have to write an entire treatment and go to try and get this pot of money. So I basically had to do all of this for free. I had to go and interview you, Jody, all the other women, and then write a treatment. So I basically wrote pretty much what I thought would be in the documentary before I got a penny. And then they give you the money. But, there's all kinds of hurdles that you have to show, do your research and give all the statistics of why this documentary deserves to be made. So there's various, headings that you have to fill in. Why is it relevant to contemporary society? Why is it relevant to Irish society? All of those things. And once I did that, I applied, and that still wasn't a foregone conclusion. And then they said, yes, you can get the money. And then I got the money to make it, and I just went and did the interviews. So, but the editing is really what takes the time and is the really, 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 really time-consuming thing for me. I mean, I had, I think, 11 hours of speech, because these are not interviews that you can do in 10 minutes over Zoom. Like, you need to go and build up a relationship first with the person, as I did with you, Jody, then talk to you before I interview, then go down to your house and sit with you and chat to you. So I could come away with an hour's interview.
I think we were talking for an hour and a half, and we could have gone on. Yeah.
But, and I'm listening all the time to say, have I covered this? Have I covered this? Have I covered this? But you can't, it's a conversation. So I'm not going to say, I'm not going to interrupt all the time. So I end up with a lot of footage because that's the way I like to work. It's a conversation that I edit. So it was getting that 12 hours, say, down to 46 minutes. That was really, really difficult. But that's really what I love doing. I had a fantastic person who does all my music, but he also does all the technicals and all the actual finessing, Dara Jukes, of the editing. And then I had a fantastic assistant, Nicola Kenny, who was one of my former MA students, and she helped with literally chopping down, like I'd say, chop this hour into this. Do you know what I mean? Online. So, but I mean, it's just so.
That sounds so labor intensive.
It is so labor intensive, but it's kind of people, like, I do a paper edit as well, because I don't think that's the way I work. So I literally transcribe everything. So I would have listened to your interview of an hour and a half, which takes 4 times that. So that's 6 hours. So it takes 6 hours to type up each interview. Then I read each interview. I print it out. I highlight the bits that I want from Jody. I do the same for the other 6 people. And then I'll put it into, like, in my head, a narrative, I had an idea of how the narrative arc would go. So I'll begin with all the women will introduce themselves. Then they go into, like, the backstories of how they became childless, say, their stories. Then we go into grief, then we go, and you kind of know if you're from writing, you have to kind of hit 75%, you kind of then need to go into a denouement, but also I wanted to end in an up note. That's
I think the ending is so perfect
I think so,
because
yeah.
it's that is how I feel. Isn't that kind of cool?
Well, it is.
Because there is this idea that, you know, that childlessness is a life sentence of misery, you poor thing, you know, and
Oh, it
actually,
was
you
so
know, that's
like,
it, you know, there is great sadness involved, some more for some than for others, but we all have to go through some kind of grief process to sort of integrate this loss into our life. And then we have the possibility of a different kind of life, you know, that we never expected. That's why my book, here we are, it happens to be here, a plug. That this, so we go into the life unexpected,
yeah,
and there are opportunities for a different way to spend our life that we perhaps hadn't considered. And that's one of, I just really appreciated that ending, because so often, you know, when I've been part of other documentaries, my interview has been cut
yeah.
because not because I've been downbeat, but because it's been a documentary about fertility or something like that. And the editors at there, well, we can't use that. You know, we need to end with a miracle baby story. So I stopped, you know, agreeing to be part of anything that's to do with fertility, because I now know it's not worth my time, because they don't want the childless story. Even though, and this is something that people are still not prepared to get their head around, the most likely outcome to fertility treatments is childlessness. You know, that
Yeah,
is the brutal truth that they are not facing. So to exclude our stories and the fact that all of us have to find our own way through this
I know.
is, it's just cruel.
And I was really, I mean, I think that's why I'm the best person to make these, you know, to make things like this as well, because I was so adamant that that could not, that's not the outcome. Like, that's not, because we're alive, we're people, we're human, we have a life. There's tons of, like, it is also to explore. And in 46 minutes, it's very hard to explore philosophically and psychologically meaning. Like, what is the meaning? Why would my life have more meaning if I had given birth to a human? Like, it makes actually no sense when you dig down into it. But to get to digging down into that, I mean, I think everybody, you've got to go through so many layers to get there, but ultimately that's the message. And it's also, I would be so insulted if it had to end on a good note, because I spend a lot of time with those 6 women, and they're all like, you're all fabulous. I mean, it's just a part of your experience of being human. It's just part of it, but it doesn't define you. It's not the whole thing. And it's also, I was so just from a storytelling point of view as well, I think I just hate those schmaltzy programs as well, or the ones they always end up with the happy baby and 2 twins by IVF and whatever, a woman of 70 having a kid. And, you know, it's just, and it gets covered because it's news and the media loves news.
Well, it's a
But
clue, you know, miracle baby story,
I know, like,
i.e. it's not normal.
it's not normal.
These
And
things are, you know,
yeah, but
um,
coming back to the getting the people to do it, I mean, there were people who pulled out after I'd begun, I was going to say filming, but recording, who I think just got such cold feet and thinking, gosh, this is just going to be too intrusive. And I would be very, very, very careful about the pieces I used of people's interviews, because as I say, I had probably an hour and a half on everybody, but I wanted to be really clear, you know, I have a responsibility then that which bits I use, because during an interview, as you know, you don't always remember exactly what you've said or how you say it. So I would have a responsibility then to make sure that I wasn't editing anything out of sequence or making somebody say something they didn't say. But I also wanted to keep, and I could have gone much deeper into the sadness and the grief. And a lot of people I know who've heard it have said, like, they just couldn't believe that people would be so sad about this. Like, they just couldn't believe. And also, like, even now people are saying it's not really taboo, is it? And I'm going, well, I didn't make it up.
yeah.
I'm not, why would it be in my interest to say this was really difficult to make and nobody wanted to do it? Like it is that is the nature, it is taboo. So I would argue strongly that it is. And by me making it, it's it's just made me believe that even more firmly.
Yeah.
And how I felt, I think the other part was how I felt when it went on air. Well, I mean, I've listened to it so many times by then I don't even listen anymore. It's like, I hope it went out okay. I'm delighted with the reaction, to be honest, just delighted. I mean, delighted to, when we work in the job, the kind of job that I really do, I mean, what you really want is to touch people, to connect with people, to make people feel something. And if you can do something positive, brilliant, all the better. If you can help somebody else, isn't that what it's about, really? So it seems that it has, and I'm delighted with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that. We have a sort of slightly philosophical and also perhaps statistical question from someone. So she says, I have a couple of childless friends due to not being in the right relationships who seem to have experienced mild regret that they couldn't have children, not the deep grief that I did. So there seems to be a spectrum between deep grief at being childless at one end and being happy at not having children, child-free at the other end. Do you have any sense of what proportions of childless women would be at the various places on the spectrum? And the spectrum is a really important word, because I think this idea childless and child-free is a binary, is something we really need to unpack, because it often isn't. And actually, many of us move around. I mean, I was child-free as a teenager and young woman. Then I got married and I became, someone who was really very looking forward to having a family. Then I couldn't have a family. Then I was childless and absolutely devastated. And now, here I am in my late 50s. In many ways, I'm sort of much more at the child-free end of the spectrum now, in that I feel very at peace with my childless, and I love my childless life. So I'm kind of what's called adapted child-free. There's very little, well, actually, there is no qualitative analysis of that. However, a meta-analysis of European and American data done in 2010 by Professor Renske Kaiser in Utrecht showed that it was 10% of those who are without children at midlife was childless. And a more recent study in the UK from those born in 1971 showed that it was quite a big study again, it was 6% were childless by choice, what is known as child-free. However, early indications coming out of the US are that many more people are choosing not to have children. Now, some of those may change their mind as they reach the fertility threshold, but some of these are already quite sort of far along in their 30s, and they're still saying that. So that's, I think, the next generation, the next cohort, the millennials, the eldest of the millennials are kind of just turning 40, 41 now. I think we're going to be seeing a really big shift between Hilary's and my generation and the next generation in terms of the numbers. And I answered that one because it's kind of my specialist subject.
But even within the documentary, like, I was very clear that I wanted to have people who had different experiences. So one of the contributors is absolutely, she was mildly, I would say mildly upset would be the right phrase. I didn't want everybody to be, because that just wouldn't be representative again of the spectrum. So I would agree. I mean, we don't know exactly. You can't, because we've got 10% might be child free, and we know the others. But of that 90%, we don't know how many people are very upset and how many people aren't.
Exactly.
We don't know. But I would imagine that it's more than you think are very upset.
And then possibly letting people think that they chose it.
And in Ireland anyway, I think the thing is that people presume that you didn't want to have children if you don't have children. They just presume it, and people allow others to think that because it's just easier.
Because, and I love in the documentary when I listed a load of bingos, I just love the sound effect that you put on it, which is bing, bing, like a competition. I laughed like a drain when you did that. It was such a lovely treatment, and then some of the other interviewees, shared their bingos as well. There's a reason we stopped talking about it, is because we get such a poor reception when we try. And if we are in a really difficult place with it, and what we're looking for support and understanding from people, and that's what we get met with, we often end up stopping trying to talk to people about it. And then they have this idea that we're okay with it, we're over it, oh, you're fine now.
Yeah.
Or that we wanted not to have children. And there's nothing wrong with being child free, but I also I support it, wholeheartedly. But I think because they are at peace with their decision and because they got the life they wanted, they're celebrating it.
Yeah.
So it's a very, I think as we get older, the experience can come back into parallel again. But I think when, when we're in that state where some people are grieving and some people are celebrating, it can make for can make things quite tricky.
And it is really complicated. Like it's not a simple subject to discuss. And I think, by the time somebody normally, in my experience, by the time somebody wants to talk about it, they've probably tried a lot of the bingos, they probably tried a lot of the things, and they actually do want to talk about help me, like I want to talk about this thing. It's like if somebody you love just died and you want to, like, people wouldn't say, oh, that's awful, like let's change the subject. They probably say, well, how do you feel? Or they let you go on about it a bit. But I think that's the bit that's just missing. It's like, because people are asking me, well, what do you want us to do? Like, I'm not saying what you must do, but I think what would be nice is if people do bring it up, I would not contradict them and say, well, you probably didn't want to have kids because they're, la 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 la, whatever. Well, nah, let's look at that now. Just say really and listen and let them say that they're sad. And I suppose to let that be validated, because when you've got somebody that you probably know quite well, because let's face it, you're not going to tell this to a stranger, are you?
Well, they'll ask.
But you know what I mean? You're not going to say to somebody, it's like the energy it takes to bring up these hard things anyway is huge. So how I know from talking to people that I interviewed, they said that they would kind of get their courage up and then say it to their best friend or something, and the best friend would say, well, some kind of,
oh, aren't you over that? I thought you were fine.
And so they would retreat into their thing going, I'm never going to bring that up again, I'm an idiot. So I think that's all we can hope, is that this opens a conversation where people can realize it is a thing. Like, a lot of people are upset about it and we're not saying everybody is grief stricken, and of course, as you say,
no, it's once again, it's going to be a spectrum. But I think something that, my work, it's been so important in my work, I didn't really get it for a while, has been about creating a language to help us have these conversations. And I know for many people, some of those conversations are going wrong within their family, and they are causing great problems within their families, with siblings that have got children that are suddenly elevated within family status, and the child that doesn't have children, their grief is disenfranchised. So it is kind of ignored, dismissed, belittled, by their closest family members. And it's so interesting how difficult it is to have this conversation. I mean, 50 years ago, when I was a child, cancer was a taboo. It was called the big C. You didn't talk about it, you didn't have it. It was kind of shameful and embarrassing and very, very private. Now it's, it's very mainstream, and there's a great deal of support around it, and there is a language around it. And although we still personally might feel a bit kind of like, oh, freaked out and confronted when we find out, and just we worry about saying the wrong thing, we kind of have some idea.
Yeah.
But childlessness is still like, people they don't know what to say back to us. And so these bingos come out because they want to be helpful, but they don't actually have the language to be helpful, just to kind of say, actually, gosh, first of all, you don't want to say, start asking questions like, is it a choice? Did you want kids? Did you really want, oh, I guess you didn't want them. It's just to go, oh, okay. How is that for you? Is that something you want to talk about? An open and curious conversation, and just so they can say, maybe another day, and you go, okay.
But I think I also find it's, I'm talking to, I know a lot of people obviously have children, and it's like me saying, like, I have a car. So if I meet somebody who doesn't have a car, like, I'm like, oh my God, you don't have a car. Really? I thought you didn't want a car. I thought you it's like they just can't. A lot of people, they're saying they never even thought about it. They just have kids, and they presume everybody who wants their kids has their kids, and the people who don't have kids didn't want kids. Okay, it's not quite that simple, but that is really, I think a lot of the people who've responded to me are saying they never really thought about this. And I'm going, but how couldn't you think about it? They said, we honestly didn't. We've just been so busy. We've 3 kids, and we've the mortgage, and we've the jobs, and, blah, blah, blah. And we just never thought about this.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point as well, because research is showing that the amount of hands-on parenting that, and particularly mothering, that women are doing now is a lot more than it was 50 years ago.
Yes.
Mothering has become much more intensive, and most of those women will also be working. So when they say they don't have any time or even headspace, they really don't. But I just want to kind of, there's a few things coming up in the chat that I wanted to respond to and also to pass to you. Someone says cancer touches everyone now. Childlessness is not yet that widespread. Interestingly, over the last few years, when I have met people who are not part of Gateway Women, who are not related to my work, and they've asked me what I do, and I say so, I've started saying, you probably know someone impacted by involuntary childlessness. And they think for a moment. Every single person has thought of someone. Their daughter-in-law, their grandson, the woman at work, the lady next door, their children. Everyone has been able to think of someone impacted by involuntary childlessness. And with the numbers possibly going up to 1 in 3, it's going to be something that people are going to become much more aware of soon. So, an interesting point about the Irish context. I note, and this is from a participant, I note a lot of new people have joined Gateway, that's the Gateway Women group in Ireland, since the documentary. But I also note that 99% of them are in Dublin. This is still an issue that people are still ashamed to discuss openly in rural or even provincial Ireland. I just wondered, what was your experience of that, Hilary?
Well, I didn't see it that way. I mean, 2 of my contributors are from the north of Ireland. 2 happen to live in Cork, and one is really Waterford based and the other is Dublin. So it didn't really, and then from the research, it was all over. I mean, I didn't really find that a thing, but I don't know if that's the case. I mean, maybe it's, I don't know. I mean, I think Ireland is pretty much sophisticated wherever you go now. So I don't know if that is the case, or if there are certain things that are harder to talk about in certain communities. But I think I didn't find that.
When I was sort of first setting up Gateway Women in the UK, I noticed that it was the same. It was and still is the same in the UK, and it was and is the same with US members as well. That they are the urban-based ones. I mean, childlessness is actually more prevalent in urban environments as well. So there is that, because often that is where people go to university and then maybe to start their careers, and that has a big impact often on later partnership and sort of fertility impacts. It may be, so there's that to feed into it as well. And someone has says that, in terms of people not talking about childlessness or taking it seriously, the menopause is only just beginning to be discussed on mainstream TV, and that affects all women. We are only 1 in 5. I say it's higher than that. So there's a long way to go before we will get any recognition. There's a big census taking place. Is it taking place now, or it starts collecting data next year, Hilary? I can't remember.
It's meant to be April of this year.
Yeah. Be very interesting to see, once that data is crunched, what the numbers are looking like. I think they're going to be a lot higher than people are expecting.
Yeah.
Quite a few people are saying, where can they watch the documentary? The documentary is called Childless, and you can find it on Apple or Spotify by searching documentary on Newstalk, and then look for the episode Childless. Also, if you go to the Gateway Women website, you'll find loads of links all over it.
And
yes.
If you go to my website, Hilary Fennell, if you just even Google Hilary Fennell and Childless, it's on my website as well.
Brilliant.
So it wouldn't be too hard if you have access to just the internet and Google. You just put in any of those words, it'll come up. It's going to be broadcast again at 9 o'clock on Saturday on Newstalk, which is the radio station in Ireland, but it's available anywhere in the world as we speak.
Yes.
So it will continue to be available on my website, because I own the copyright in it, so it's going to be mine.
I'm seeing here, do you remember, Hilary, when you and I were talking about the PR and what radio shows and stuff we wanted to be on, and you said, someone's put here, my dream is for it to be on Joe Duffy, and that's what
I've been so busy. I'm on my list tomorrow. I'm going to email Joe and his researcher, because without going into the technicalities of this is public service broadcasting, but you can imagine it's on a different radio station. Joe Duffy's on RTE, so it's on Newstalk. I don't think that's really going to matter. I mean, I just want to publicize the topic. So I do think, listen out, watch this space, because I am going to contact Joe.
That's brilliant.
Well,
So I'm wondering how the documentary has been received by your colleagues within the industry and the general public. You said you've had a lot of, a lot of people contacting you. Are they colleagues? I mean, certainly that Sean Moncrieff interview was amazing. He had you on the show for 20 minutes.
27 minutes.
27 minutes, yeah.
I think it's a record. I listened back and said, oh my God, have you ever seen Trainspotting? I sounded like the guy in the interview.
You did not.
I was. Damn. Because I kept on thinking he's going to, they said it'll probably be 15 minutes. So I should have just gone slower because but you get so excited, don't you, when you have an opportunity to talk about these things. Sorry, what was your question?
How was the documentary received by your colleagues and by the general public?
Really well. I mean, so far, as in saying it's a very good piece of work, which I hope it is, because I like my work to be of a very high standard, but also just a lot of people saying, God, we didn't even think this was a thing. Because before I made it, I did, it was during COVID, so I obviously wasn't meeting too many people out randomly, but I did at a couple of, gatherings. I was trying to tell a couple of people I know, say before Christmas, and they work in the media, and they just couldn't get it. They were like, what? It's about like women with children. Like, what do you mean? Why is that a topic? They didn't want to have children. And I'm going, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. So it actually has been very well. I think when people listen to it, they get it, because it's just so straightforward, really, isn't it? I mean, it's just looking at an aspect of human life, contemporary human life, that rarely gets discussed. That's all it is. It's as simple as that. But I think once you shine a light on something, I think the abortion referendum campaign here, wasn't it that they used in her shoe, walk a mile in her shoes or something, and they encouraged people to look at their own lives and think of people and say, somebody's had an abortion. It was kind of the same thing. It was only when people looked and said, oh my God, and that it normalized it or made it seem that it was something that was more prevalent. And I think, like you say, Jody, that when people actually, when you say it to them that way, like, well, just think about in your life, you probably do know somebody who's involuntarily childless. That kind of stops people in their tracks, because then they see you're not trying to catch them out or anything. You're not trying to be clever. You're just saying, it's just a thing that's out there, and can we not just A, discuss it, but B, then look beyond it and see what are the ramifications. So yeah, it's been really, really positive so far. And I mean, just fantastic contributors. I mean, yourself and the other 5 women were just so generous with their time, so honest, so completely honest. I mean, that's what makes a documentary like that. It's getting those people.
It's so powerful,
aren't they? They're so powerful.
Yeah.
And they're so honest, and so forthcoming, and that's really brave to share your story like that. Really brave. So that's what makes it so good.
Yeah, I hope it wins lots of awards. There's a question here: will it make a difference if people download the documentary? Will it give you more chance of getting funding for the TV series? Yes, it will. It will give us metrics. Hilary, tell us a little bit about your plans for the TV series and maybe how we can all help you.
So what I need to do is go through this whole process again, where I know, along with so many other things, but like other projects I'm working on. So I'll probably go, it's such a global issue that Ireland is very small, and our television station has no money, and blah blah. So it's always going to be tiny budgets, and I want to make a really good series. So I might link up maybe with a UK company or somebody in the north of Ireland. We see, can we get UK funding as well, and we could make it in Ireland, England, Scotland. We could make it English speaking. It would also mean we'd have a wider pool of people to, because it's one thing going on radio, but you can imagine people. That's why I wanted to test the waters first and see. But I know we could do it. So the idea for the TV series conceptually is that we would feature not just women, but men, members of the LGBTQ community. We would look at, it's going to be bigger than a one-off. And how you can help is by either going to my website and listening to the radio program, because there are metrics there, it's on SoundCloud, or going to Apple Podcasts via Newstalk, and then I can say, look, this was so interesting, it merits just a TV series. You could also follow us on, myself and Jody, on Instagram, and at least that would be metrics I could show. You could like our posts, but beyond that, when I am looking for, so I need to get funding, but before that I need to say, this is an outline of the program. So if anybody's saying, I would love to be on this program, if you could contact me or Jody and tell us why, that would be brilliant for me, because I don't have them. Like, it would be, otherwise I'm paying for the research myself. I'm trying to find people. But if people would come to me and say, I'm looking for a cross section of people with different stories to tell, who are going, yes, we want to do this, that would be a huge help. But also, really, if there's anybody out there who works in funding, like, who knows, and what you're in, who, like, I would be a producer, but we know we obviously need to raise money for it. That's really the way it goes, but I have a good feeling this is so zeitgeisty, that, so I'm also open to work with other people. Maybe ideally I think I should present it and work with somebody else as a producer, because it's just too much to do everything yourself. So I'm open to all those things. At the moment, I just want to get in there quickly with the idea and just say, I think it's time. These things can take a year at least in fruition, to come to fruition. But that's how you could help. But especially if you're interested in being a contributor, it would be great to know, because that really helps me. Then I don't have to go out searching. I've got people coming to me. That'd be great.
I've just put Hilary's website into the chat. It's Hilary Fennell, and that's NNL.com. And also if you Google Hilary Fennell spelled anyway, Childless, you'll probably find her website as well. It's a bit like Jody and Childless now gets you to me. It's like, I'm going to become like Oprah. You're just going to need one word to find me soon. It's getting quite ridiculous. And there are people in the chat saying they'd love to be on the programme. There are people with ideas of, different documentary strands you could approach for funding.
Brilliant. Oh, listen.
Yeah.
I think television this time. It doesn't have to be, but I think television, it might be. Yeah, I think we should. I think radio's one thing. I think to have it on telly would be great as well. But a proper, like, I make really high-end television. So it'll be, really, really.
And I think some of the topics, like you discuss them, childless men, LGBT.
Okay.
I think also aging without children is a really, really important issue.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I think also, zeroing in perhaps on, for me, what I'm seeing is one of the fastest growing groups of women who are single and childless. So they're childless because they don't have a partner, and this might include LGBT women as well. They have all the same relationship and fertility issues as heterosexual women, but they're always left out of this conversation. And also, I think women of colour, sort of the intersectional aspects of how childlessness. Because both fertility and childlessness, and here I am, white, middle class, the face of childlessness for God knows how that happened, but and but it's really important that we expand the conversation, because it crosses all of the lines.
That's it. Really, it's really to develop a series, so it wouldn't just be taking the radio series and making it 6-part series. It would have to be much more to it than that. And also, you can imagine with TV, you've got to have great visuals as well. So you've got to be telling a story, and maybe looking into more journalistically, maybe interviewing people, experts, you know what I mean, about why this is happening, that type of thing. So I have had quite a lot of response from people, say academics as well, or people who work in research about this. So, and some of them are childless as well. So as I'm sure there's a couple of well-known people, Jody, that you'd know. So they might be part of it. But I think it would be the next step. I do think it would be the next step.
And of course, in the workplace, which is where, I mean, Gateway Women has behind the scenes been working in that area for a while, and I'm really noticing that organisations are starting to really actually think about, well, what does it mean? You know,
Yeah.
if 20% of our workforce are non-parents, what does that mean? How? Because I said in my 2017 TED Talk, which if anyone hasn't seen it, it's called "The Lost Tribe of Childless Women," is, you know, people without children in the workplace is the biggest diversity issue HR hasn't heard of. Now that was 4 years ago. I really thought someone would pick up the bait within a year and say, we want to be the first ones to sort this out. But it's been so slow. But I think the pandemic has really highlighted a lot of societal inequalities, what it's like to be aging without children. I mean, the whole kind of public discourse, as you say, about the hugging grandparents one, not so many people are aging without children. They don't, and even if you're much younger and you're single and childless and you're isolated and you're working from home and you get ill, who's there for you? How do we develop a more effective and more compassionate infrastructure that supports all of us?
And I suppose that's really why at the bottom of making this program, that's really, it's a societal, it's a question saying, how have we come to this, that everybody is so atomized and in so many cases, the people I was speaking to, they just talked about isolation, loneliness and isolation. And I said, this can't be right. And again, it's a lot of it is sometimes it's in people's heads, because we're so this vision, if you had mommy, daddy, baby, you'd all be happy, and dog and car, and we know intellectually that that's not true necessarily, but because that's still sold as the promised land, and that's what I think the problem is. We need to really have better representations of what life is really like for that isn't necessarily always going to be great, but as well that there's so many other people leading really fantastic, happy lives without that, and they don't look like that. Now I know there's lots and lots of films and dramas that are made that blow up that myth, but I still think in mainstream media, like last year I did an MA in looking at 20 films, the representation of childless women in 20 modern films, and they were all tragic. There was one positive thing. And anytime, it's always Jennifer Aniston. Like anytime Jennifer Aniston looks sad, oh, she's sad she doesn't have a baby. Oh, she's sad. Like, it's like, for God's sake.
The most famous uterus in the world. I mean, really, people.
So, and I know, Jody, you've a thing, don't you? The gallery of really fantastic childless women, so certainly in any TV documentary, maybe we should just go and interview a whole section of fantastically really happy.
And also I'm writing a novel, and of course it features a childless heroine, and her story is not completed by her having a baby. There's no miracle baby ending in my novel. Something I've discovered, the thing about childless woman is often used as a cipher for deviant woman. It's shorthand. And I'll be watching any TV program, and then there'll be a slightly unpleasant or slightly offbeat woman in it, and I'll sit there and I'll go, that'll be the childless one. Within half an hour or a few episodes, it's, she's always childless or child-free every single time, because that means there's something wrong with her.
Yeah.
So writers use it as an unconscious cipher. This goes right back. You look at all of the fairy tales, Snow White, Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel, the cannibalistic scary woman is always childless.
Cruella de Vil.
But don't get me started on that one, because we've only got 2 minutes to go. I know. Does anyone have a last question for Hilary? Just pop it in the chat, because I'm just looking at the chat. Okay, I've put you all on the spot. You've all suddenly gone silent. Don't worry about that. So Hilary, when do you think, where else do you think we're going to see this documentary? I mean, it's available all over the world by just going on to Apple and going documentary on Newstalk and finding the episode Childless. Are you hoping for it to be broadcast on other channels apart from Newstalk?
Yes, I'll certainly go to BBC Radio 4 and to some PBS stations in public service broadcasting stations in America. But I mean, it's there forever now. So I mean, you just have to Google it and you can find it. So it's going to be living, whether or not Newstalk take it down or not, it'll always be on my website. So it's accessible there. I would just like to see people, if people would be kind enough, if they like it from today, to just tell other people about it in social media groups. That would be great, and just get them to listen, because I say, if we don't kind of band together on this, getting funding for the TV thing might be more problematic. But I have a feeling it'll be okay. So it'd be great if people would just listen to it.
Thank you. Well, the tribe of childless women is behind you. And I know that within the Gateway Women community and wider community, we have many women with connections and who work in the media. Let's see if we can leverage all the amazing women we are to help get this documentary a wider audience. I just want to say thank you so much, Hilary. I also wanted to say a big thank you to the contributors to the documentary. I know a few of them are on the call with us tonight. Just want to say a big thank you for opening up, for being so vulnerable, so courageous, so genuine. Yeah, I'm a bit touched. It was very touching to hear those stories. Thank you. If you are watching in Ireland or somewhere and you think you'd really like to meet other Irish women or other childless women, you can meet them in person and online in the Gateway Women membership community. Just go to the Gateway Women website, click on online community, and you'll find your way to it from there. And Hilary's website, once more, is hilaryfennell.com, where you can find out all about the documentary and also, share all your ideas. Hilary's also on Instagram at Hilary Fennell and on Twitter at Hilary Fennell with a little underscore tail on the end. But you'll find that when you go to her website. So thank you so much. Last words, Hilary.
So again, to the contributors, that's Jody and the other 5 women, thank you so much, because without you, really, there'd be nothing. So it's really that bravery of putting your voices out there, allowing me to interview you, but then trusting me to edit those interviews. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Hilary. It's been delightful to have you with us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Thanks a lot. Bye.